Good afternoon and welcome to this session. I'm Arundhathi Subramaniam and I'm in conversation with yogi, mystic, spiritual master, Sadhguru. He's the founder of Isha, a spiritual organization with centers worldwide, an organization with well-being as its core commitment. He's the recent recipient of the Padma Vibhushan and a lot more besides. And maybe we'll uncover some of that in the course of this conversation. But what we're going to be talking about today is the concept of the sacred and the concept of the secular, whether the two are irreconcilable, as they so often seem to be, or whether they are in fact inseparable, which is the way Sadhguru sees them. And to begin, I'd actually like to start with a very short anecdote. And I mention it here because I think it's an anecdote that addresses certain assumptions that are very commonly held about the sacred. But I also mention it here because I think it addresses certain assumptions that are often held about the notion of the Guru. As someone who met Sadhguru more than 12 years ago, and as someone who approached him with a certain measure of caution, because the very word Guru seemed to be such a loaded one. It seemed so hierarchical, so authoritarian, so medieval in my understanding of it. I think this anecdote, in some ways, is the right one to mention here. Some years ago, recently, Sadhguru was introduced to this gentleman, who happened to be a staunch, dyed-in-the-wool atheist. And he was very clear that he wanted to clarify at the start with Sadhguru that he was not going to be a groveling acolyte. So on introduction, his very first opening line was, "Do you know I believe there is no God?" That was the beginning. And Sadhguru's response to that was, "Really? I don't believe even that." And I think that line, in many ways, is the ideal entry point into this conversation. It offers an insight into Sadhguru, but it also, I think, questions an assumption that regards belief in God as synonymous with the pursuit of the sacred. And that's still a commonly held assumption today, although Sadhguru and many before him have said time and again that the spiritual journey does not necessitate believing in God, that skepticism is often the ideal starting point for the spiritual journey, and that a spirit of inquiry rather than a spirit of uncritical obedience is a prerequisite for this journey. So on that note, I'm going to start by asking Sadhguru to say something more about what you've often talked about, Sadhguru, the fact that we are in fact a subcontinent of seekers rather than believers.
Namaskaram. We must understand that, good evening everyone. I said good evening to all of you. Why are you not on talking terms with me already? And if I say something silly, pardon me, because if I don't keep my legs crossed, my brains don't work.
Do you want to have a chair, Sadhguru?
So we need to understand this. If human intelligence is sincere, when I say sincere, human intelligence can be sincere only if it's unidentified. That is, it is not identified with anything of culture, of religion, of race, above all, of our own physical form and the species that we are. If you learn to keep your intelligence completely unidentified, then seeking is a natural way. Because if you're not identified, you will look at everything with absolute involvement and attention. If you pay attention to something, you will see with every aspect of life, there is more unknown than known. Whether you take a single atom or the cosmos or in between anything, you will see there is more unknown than known about every aspect of our lives. So in this context, the yogic culture always trained people to be identified with their ignorance. Because how much ever we know, our knowledge is such a small thing. But our ignorance is boundless. So that to make the identity as boundless as possible, it's best to identify with ignorance rather than knowledge, because knowledge is a certain boundary that you've set for yourself. So the moment you see this, seeking is a natural consequence. It is not a choice. It is not that you choose, I'm becoming a seeker. It is just a consequence. But the moment you get identified, you will inevitably believe something, like whatever you were mentioning. Some people believe in God, some people disbelieve in God, theists and atheists. They are not different people, just pretending to be different. Both of them believe something that they do not know. Or somewhere, there is neither courage nor commitment to know, just to conclude. Somebody believes there is, somebody believes there isn't. But the fact of the matter is, you do not know a thing about how this happened. It doesn't matter if you live here for 1,000,000 years and pay as much attention as you want to everything, you will see your ignorance will unfold, not knowledge. The more you know about it, about anything, the more you will realize there is much more to be known. So seeking is not some kind of a religion by itself. Seeking is not an identity that you take on. Seeking is not by choice. It is a natural consequence of an unprejudiced intelligence. Believing is convenient because when you believe, you will become confident. Confidence without clarity is a disaster. There is too much of this disaster happening in this world because you can shout a slogan and become very confident even if you can't see a thing. There is no substitute for clarity. Clarity needs a constant pursuit. But confidence is a closure. Belief means you have closed something within yourself. It may give you immediate advantages of looking confident in front of other people, but the most idiotic are always very confident. In fact, confidence is a stupid thing. If you have clarity, you'll find your way through without fuss. If you have confidence without clarity, you'll blunder your way through many things, though you know nothing about it. And sometimes it may work, like everything else works. Like flipping a coin works 50% of the time. Similarly, confidence works 50% of the time. Sometimes percentages could improve too.
But in that case, Sadhguru, how would you define the idea of the sacred? Because you're saying it doesn't necessitate a belief in God, but on the other hand, the very word sacred derives from to consecrate, and that's something you do a great deal of. In fact, you have a consecration coming up in just a few days. What does it mean then?
So when you say sacred, there are two ways to it. One thing is, something can become sacred in somebody's mind, in people's minds and hearts, because they hold it that way. Someone holds their mother sacred. She may be just another woman, but in your mind and heart, she is sacred. This is an individual experience. It's best we don't trample on this, because they hold it sacred, it's precious to them. Because there is a longing in a human being. In this vast emptiness of space, which we call as cosmos, this tiny little creature called human being, there is always a need to hold on to something which you think is more than you. So, someone makes something sacred, just about anything can become sacred. A stone can become sacred, 2 sticks can become sacred, just about anything can become sacred, depending on how they hold it. This is a certain way of holding something within an individual person. It is their thought and emotion. But when we say sacred, we are looking at a dimension which functions either beyond physical nature or at least on the subtlest dimension of physicality. If you take this human being, the physical itself can be made sacred depending upon how you keep it, or at least the life that this physical form holds is considered sacred. Whatever is the subtlest aspect of life is considered sacred because it functions to different laws than the physical manifestation functions. So that dimension of life, which is not completely enslaved to the physical laws of existence. When I say physical, anything that's physical is naturally cyclical. Whether it's an atom or a cosmos, everything is cyclical in nature. Everything that's physical is inevitably cyclical. Cyclical means repetitive. Repetitive means not going anywhere. It has no purpose of its own unless something else is infused into it. This body has no purpose of its own unless it can hold life in it. So, physical can be a platform, but a subtler dimension that it is capable of holding is considered sacred. About consecration is just this. If you can convert a physical space into a space which will become conducive for people to touch that dimension beyond physicality, then we say it's consecrated. Consecrated does not mean that you made a god out of something. In fact, what one refers to as God, knowingly or unknowingly, is just this, that which is the source of this physical existence. Because we are human beings naturally would like to think God is a big human being. If we were buffaloes, we would definitely think God is a big buffalo. And nothing wrong about it. Why can't it be? So, our idea of giving forms to things is essentially our need. But is there a dimension beyond physicality? Absolutely. Is there a way to touch it? Definitely. The method of touching it or making it available to people is consecration. So, when you create this access for the physical to come to the proximity of a dimension beyond the physical, then that's sacred.
In an article that you'd written recently, you talked about the secular, particularly in the Indian context, You've forgotten the article,
That's a dangerous area to
Sadhguru.
go into.
But you talked about the secular as, particularly in India, as not as a denial of faith, but as a worldview that accommodates a whole plurality of faiths and persuasions. And you said in that article that it is in the nature of human intelligence to be secular.
Because I understand secular as all-inclusive. If it is so, yes.
Okay.
If you understand secular as being a party, a political party, no.
If you're saying that it's the spirit of inquiry that one finds in both the quest for the sacred and the secular, is that what you're saying, that both of them lie at the heart of it? That inquiry is an important part of both?
I don't think secular needs enquiry. Secular means, in my mind, maybe this is not the dictionary meaning, I don't know, in my mind, secular means you are not screwed up in your head, that's all.
Very often an assumption, perhaps, is that the sacred is in some way synonymous with the non-rational and the secular with the rational. This is often a framework that people operate out of. If that is the case, then particularly at a time when we see religious identities turning dogmatic across the board, it would often seem that the progressive, the sane option is a secular worldview, and that a worldview that keeps the sacred out of its purview altogether.
Now, that is a very constipated secularism. Is it true, when you were 8 years of age, what kind of rationale you have didn't make much sense when you were 18? Is it true, the rationale that you thought was everything at 18 did not make much sense when you were 30? Can I advance your age a little more?
And I must add that I'm a poet, so these are not my questions. Poets don't have problems with reconciling the sacred and the secular either.
Is it not true in every human being's life, unless you are very fanatical, in every human being's life, their logic and their rationale is evolving? What looked great at one time, at another time doesn't make sense. Please allow it to evolve. If you really allow it to evolve, you will touch the sacred.
You know, when I first met you, Sadhguru, there was a story you often related, probably an apocryphal story about the Buddha. The Buddha and his encounter with a Ram Bhakt and a Charvaka. I was just wondering if you'd like to mention that here, if you'd like to bring that up, because in many ways it suggests to me dogmatism on both sides of the divide, the sacred and the secular, could well be an issue.
See, being dogmatic is another creed by itself. Neither the secular nor the sacred can be dogmatic. Dogmatic is another creed by itself. I think we should have three, not just two.
You've often talked about debate and the spirit of debate that's been such a vital part of the spiritual history of the subcontinent. You know, you've talked about the debate, whether it's the Kurukshetra debate between Arjuna and Krishna, whether it's Shiva and Shakti in the Shiva Sutras, whether it's the very impassioned metaphysical debates that seem to have happened around the time of the Buddha or Adi Shankara. Is it true to say that that spirit of debate in some way seems to be imperiled today? That we don't have enough of it today?
Oh, I think we're having a lot of it.
In our spiritual life?
Yes, of course. Wherever I go, there's endless number of questions, especially in India. Nowhere else do people ask as many questions as the Indians ask. We were trekking in Tibet with a group of people. This is people from at least about 30 different countries. An Indian person who lives in United States asked me a question. The question takes over 8 minutes. A question inside a question inside a question inside a question inside a question. Then by the time he finishes the question, all the other people, that is, Indians are simply sitting nonchalantly, but all the others are looking bewildered. I said, it's okay, this is an Indian question. We have a very long history of asking questions. This is why nobody could ever give us a commandment. Even entities that we considered divine, when they came, we only asked them questions. So don't worry, this is an Indian question. Then there's a Chinese lady who's traveling with us. She says, yes, Sadhguru, I was working in the United Nations. Even there, only Indians asked questions. So, I don't think in any sense it's gone. Maybe some people are trying to banish the questions because it is a draw. When you don't have answers, you don't like questions. When you're not sincere enough to admit that you do not know, when you yourself do not have a spirit of inquiry, you have read half a book and from that you're living out of that, then you don't like questions. Wherever questions were asked in many parts of the world, in the religious world at least, usually the questioner dies because that's a convenient way of answering questions. I'm speaking in Lebanon. I'm not abusing anybody. I'm just asking a few questions, raising a few questions. It's a large group of people, a few youths stand up and say, you are going to leave this country head first. And I say, wherever I go head first. You are going with your butt first. This is the problem with you. You also must go head first. No, what they mean is, I will leave the country horizontal, that's what they mean. They don't mean head first means they will probe with their intelligence and then go. No, they mean you will be dead because you raise questions for which we don't have answers. How can a question insult anybody? A question is just a tool to dig deeper. A question should not be a statement. A question is just a tool so that we can dig deeper. If you raise a question that I have not thought about, it's a good opportunity for both of us to get hold of this crowbar and dig deeper. But instead of that, we will stick a knife into you because I don't have the answers. But I've been pretending for a long time that everything that you need to know is all written in my book or some other book, and that's about it. There can't be anything more to the universe. Now you raised a question which cannot exist in this universe, but you have raised it, so better you do not exist.
You were talking about this just 2 days ago, I remember, at the satsang, when someone asked you about this impulse to constantly turn to the past for answers. When it comes to spiritual answers, it's either scriptural authority or some kind of traditional authority to which we habitually turn. And I know that I began my own book on you with the line, I thought dead gurus made more sense, always. I preferred my gurus dead. Somehow that seems…
Because you can twist them and turn them the way you want.
Absolutely, they seem more convenient. So, how
Dead are always convenient, because you can make them the way you want. But when I'm here alive, you can't have me the way you want.
What is this whole business about scripture? What would be the right way to approach scripture? Is the problem really that we're approaching it we're adopting some kind of deep freeze approach to scripture?
See, we're talking about times when the entire library of humanity was in one book. We're not talking about times when there was a printing press and everybody could read and write. Hardly 2 people could read and write, hardly 10 people were literate. And whatever happened in that society, whatever they thought is useful, whatever they thought is wisdom, whatever they thought is simple technologies of well-being, they stored it up in one book. So everything was in one book, and then somebody sorted it out, at least in India, into 4 books. Then somebody made a commentary about it, something like this. There may be nuggets of wisdom here and there, yes, I'm not questioning that. But at the same time, if you ask 3 questions, 90% of the world's scriptures will collapse. Nobody likes this, I know. I am unpopular among the Hindus, Muslims and Christians because if you ask 3 questions, their heavens will collapse, believe me. Yes, because people have been trying to live like this. If small things go wrong in their life, they will find one little guy, it must be because of him. If big things go wrong in their life, they'll find that big guy, it's because of him. This guy has been missing for a long time. Only when this guy comes in, something sacred can happen. When this guy really unfolds, when this guy flowers into its fullest possibility, something truly sacred will happen. Otherwise, you are making things sacred. Suppose you do not know what is the content of this book. If we just have the right kind of cover, we can make you feel very sacred about that book. It may be empty or it may be something dirty, but you can just believe. And anyway, I've just generally inquired, with all due respect to everybody, I found a whole lot of people who will be professing that scriptures are sacred and wonderful, they never read it. It's so sacred, they never opened it. Genuinely, I'm telling you this. Very few people who are professing scriptures have actually read it. Rest are just saying, if it's so old, it must be sacred. Then the rocks are sacred, at least the old trees are sacred, please. Everything that is old is sacred means planet is sacred. If you do that, at least you would walk a little more gently on this planet. Why is not a rock sacred? For me, it's very sacred. I love the rocks. But somewhere, people have come to this that people who lived here on this planet, either 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 years ago, were much smarter than you and me. I don't agree with that. Yes, there have been many wonderful sages and yogis and siddhas and wonderful people, but they were always a minority. And don't imagine that they got to write all the scriptures. No. It is those who found the sponsorships who got to write, as it is today. But here and there, somebody mopped up a little bit of wisdom, some wonderful things. Yes, they have done, there's no question about this. This is not about dismissing anything arbitrarily, but putting everything through the filter. Because if you don't put it through the filter, all the ancient muck will get into your head and you will not be able to live a sensible life. This time, here, we must understand this. This is our time on the planet. And it's a brief time. If you are a very joyful human being, it'll be very brief. Miserable means it'll be long. But it's a very brief life and it's our time. It's for us to exercise this intelligence, this emotion, this energy, this capability to find our way. This does not mean you throw away all the ancient experience. No, we want to make use of that. But at the same time, don't let the dead live. Dead must stay dead. The living must live. It's very, very important. We are trying to make the dead live. In the process, the living are half dead. That's not good for life. There is nothing sacred about it nor secular about it.
In which case, what is the role of the live guru?
I'm still alive, that's what is most important.
And what is the role of this live guru?
See, it's like this. As I was telling you, I'm every year trekking in Himalayas, in Nepal and Tibet. There I'm being led by an illiterate Sherpa. He knows I am Sadhguru from India. Every day in the morning, he comes and tries to fall at my feet and seek blessings and everything. But once I'm in the mountains, he says like this. I say, why not like this? He said, I just go where he says, because he knows the terrain better, that's all. If I think I'm a guru and a big man and he says like this, I go like this, believe me, you'll be dead. So on that terrain, he is the master. If he says like this, without question I go like that. Because I know from experience, he knows the terrain better than me. Similarly, when you talk about the inner terrain, it's best to go with somebody who's walked the terrain before you. If you try to act smart, you'll get lost. Well, today you drive your car, maybe not so much in India yet, but anywhere else, that strange lady with East European accent says, turn right, you turn right. She says, turn left, you turn left. So, the GPS, you follow simply. In every aviation thing, like in an airplane or a helicopter, it's always marked. You should not depend on the GPS alone. Okay, you must have the other calculations ready, anytime. But slowly as you fly, you give up your other calculations because they're so bloody complex. After some time, you keep going by the GPS because it seems to know better than you for sure, okay? It's a dumb instrument that some human being made, but it seems to know way better than you once you're up in the sky where you don't have any visual reference. So you just stick to it. So this is just pure sense. This is nothing sacred, nothing anything. This is just pure sense. When you are on a terrain that is unfamiliar to you, you take instructions from one who seems to know. If he doesn't know, then you should leave him.
In which case, the guru is a device, a technology that one adopts. Is that what you'd say?
Right now I'm a man.
The GPS is a technology.
A GPS is a certain consolidation of knowledge, knowing and perception. A GPS doesn't store everything in it. It has sources, it has resource. Similarly, a guru has an advanced sense of perception about a few things. If your perception grows to that extent, you don't have to listen to him. If your perception is as good as his, please do your life, that'll leave me free.
But the reason I ask this, Sadhguru, is because you've often talked about the Dhyanalinga itself as a device. So the Dhyanalinga being an energy form that many would consider a sacred energy form at the Isha Yoga Center. So it almost seems like an extension of that would be to regard the Guru himself, in a sense, as a device. And you've even talked of belief as a device. And that brings me to this question, which is belief, what is the role of belief in this entire spiritual system? Is belief just an impediment, or is it a device? Is it something that one might use as a temporary device? We are, after all, a subcontinent with 33 million gods and goddesses, as you've often pointed out.
Don't go into all that, it'll come down to something very simple. When you were 3 years of age, did you run up to your mother and hug her and believe she is the most wonderful and the highest entity on the planet? Did you or did you not?
I did.
You believed that. But as you grew up, did you find out that she's just another woman with her own problems and limitations and nonsense and everything? Yes or no? But when you were 3, if you thought so, then a lot of life would be destroyed. It's very wonderful when you were 3 years of age, you believed your mother is everything and she's fantastic and she's the highest thing. It's very needed. If you did not believe that, the nourishment of life would not happen to you. Later on, you saw many things, that's another matter. Similarly, at different stages in your life, in different stages of your psychological and emotional development, you may go through certain things. It is not for anybody to judge this as this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do. It's not about that, it's not about right and wrong, it's about what works. When we talk about tools and devices, as you said, Dhyanalinga, whatever, when I refer to these temples as tools, people feel insulted, people say, Sadhguru, it's more than our life, how can you say this? I tell them, you come to the yoga center, I will put you in the plumbing department. You can do plumbing maintenance and plumbing jobs, but we won't give you any spanners or winches or any other tools. Just with your bare hands, you do. If you want, you can use your teeth. In 3 days, all your fingernails will be gone and many teeth will be gone. After 3 days, if you come to me and if I give you a spanner, will you become worshipful about the spanner or not? Now, we must understand this, as human beings, we are who we are on this planet only because of our ability to use tools. If we did not know how to use tools, a pack of dogs would have dominated human beings. Human beings have become the most dominant force, not because of our physical strength, not because of anything else, it is only because of our ability to use tools. So, as there are physical tools, material tools, there are subjective tools that one can create and use for enhancement of life. Right now, I'm able to talk to all of you because there is a microphone. We can talk to somebody far away because of a telephone. All tools that we have created is only an extension of the existing faculties that we already have, because we can see a microscope or a telescope, because we can speak these phones, because we are mobile, we have a bicycle and an automobile and all kinds of things. Everything is just an extension of the existing faculties we have. So all tools are just this. Because a human being also has the ability to look inward, there are subjective tools to take him there easily. Without a tool, if I ask you to just unscrew a simple screw in this furniture, you won't be able to do it. If I give you a little screwdriver, you can do it. That is the power of the tool. You must make use of the tool.
Except that it takes me back to this other question. We started by talking about the spirit of inquiry, but then we also talk about the guru as this GPS, which means if you trust this guru, you follow instructions. So how does the spirit of inquiry fit into this notion of following instructions? Where does skepticism, you've often said, and I put this into the biography which I wrote some years ago, there was a wonderful quotable quote that Sadhguru offered at one point in a conversation, where he said that the spiritual process is just skepticism formalized, and there is no better seeker than a skeptic. So how does that fit in with this idea of the one who obeys instructions?
See, I think a whole lot of people have gotten confused between skepticism and being suspicious. A skeptic means someone who will not accept anything without the needed examination, without the needed filters. One who is suspicious means they've already made conclusions, negative conclusions about everything. It's got to be wrong. So let's not mistake these two things. When we say a skeptic, we're talking about someone with 1,000 questions. Now, just because you have 1,000 questions, and especially because you have 1,000 questions, seeking answers is natural. And now that you're seeking answers, is it possible in your ego to allow that somebody might have found some answers? And if they have found answers, it is better to take instructions from them rather than reinventing the wheel. With every simple thing that you do in your life, with every mechanical thing around you, are you not taking instructions? If you buy a phone, are you not reading the instructions how to make use of this? So why is the resistance about dimensions which are within you? If you resist, your condition will be such that to find a next-door neighbor, you made a global circumnavigation and came back. If you think that's smart, no, I think it's just stupid. To find a next-door neighbor, if you went around the world and got there, I think it's stupid, and that's what will happen if you do not take instructions from someone who knows the terrain better than you. As I told you, when I go to the mountains, I just surrender to the Sherpa. He says like this, I just go like that. He doesn't always tell me, sir, come this way. He just says like this. I just follow him because I know for sure he knows the terrain better than me. I am not a duff on the mountains. I have been on mountains, I understand mountains better than most people. But still, when I am on those mountains, I just surrender to the man because 100% he knows the mountains better than me.
Sadhguru, you've talked about this in your biography, when we wrote the book at that time, you've talked about this extensively, your own younger days when you were this wild, skeptic motorcyclist in Mysore. And I'm wondering whether that skepticism in some way predisposed you towards becoming the mystic that you are today. Do you think it would have been different had you been a devout believer of some kind? Would your journey have been different? Was that skepticism an advantage, is what I'm asking you?
If there are no questions in your mind, why would you bother to seek? Only because questions torment you and you're unable to bear the pain of ignorance, of not knowing a thing about anything, that you seek. You make it the mainstay of your life because the pain of ignorance troubles you. When I was very young, I realized that I did not know anything. Anything means anything at all. If I looked at the water, I would be staring at the water for hours. If I looked at a leaf for many hours, if I sat up in the bed staring at darkness, I would be staring at this darkness for the entire night. To an extent, my dear father, being a physician, started thinking I need psychiatric evaluation. But my problem was, anything I looked at it, the more and more I looked at it, I realized the less and less I knew about it. Now, this created a cloud of billion questions around me all the time. I was always looking for somebody who can answer these questions. And then everybody looked so confident and, well, I thought they knew. It took me a while to understand they have come to terms with their ignorance, which I could not. The worst thing that a human being does is, they make a deal with their ignorance. That's belief. You have made a deal with your ignorance. You should not make a deal with your ignorance. It's all right to be ignorant, but to be conscious that you're ignorant is very important. Because if you keep yourself conscious that you're ignorant, the very nature of human intelligence is such, it will remain on and on and on 24 hours of the day, even in your sleep, believe me. But the moment you make a deal with your ignorance, which you are calling as belief, then you can sleep peacefully, and in fact, that's all you will do.
I know that we need to throw this open to the audience very soon, but I just want to ask the last question, Sadhguru, because we've talked about belief.
It says 00, that means your time is up.
Yes, but burning questions are permitted, and that's the advantage of being a moderator. I think the one word that we haven't used so far is faith. And I just want to know, because we've mentioned belief, I just want to know, for most people it seems like almost every spiritual tradition seems to require at some point a leap of faith. Is that where reason and the sacred and the secular really part ways, where reason and faith part ways?
Have you ever fallen in love with somebody?
Yes, indeed, many times.
Did it make sense to you?
Yes, it did.
Really?
Yes.
No, experientially maybe, but logically did it make sense? Logically did it…
No.
Did it make reasonably sense to you? If it did, that's
No.
not a love affair.
True enough. True enough.
That is a dissection of people. So I'm saying, there is a thought and there is an emotion in a human being. In the name of intellect, most human beings have very constipated sense of emotion. They cannot feel anything profoundly. They will cry for a few things if they lose them, but they cannot look at the full moon today is a full moon. They cannot look at the full moon today and come to tears. They cannot look at a flower blossoming and come to tears. They cannot look at a child smile and come to tears. They cannot simply close their eyes and come to tears. I'm saying tears because any profound experience, if it raises beyond a certain intensity, tears will naturally come. Such things will never happen to most people because they have succumbed to their silly intellect, very rudimentary logic, which makes everything material. But if they pay little attention, these flowers have blossomed and some of them are fragrant, not because somebody put perfume into the soil, somebody put filth into the soil. That is why the flowers are fragrant, isn't it? Does the filth and the flower look the same, smell the same? But one who looks at things logically would inevitably go in this direction, that he thinks that if flowers have to be fragrant, you have to pour perfume to the roots and kill them. That's what will happen. Intellect is a knife. If you try to stitch things with a knife, you will leave everything in tatters. This is what is happening to the world. Our education systems have nurtured only one dimension of human intelligence called intellect. All the other dimensions of one's intelligence is completely stifled. Emotion is another dimension of intelligence. What is going about as faith? Faith is a certain sense of devotion. If your emotions rise to a certain pitch, you become devotional. Devotion means… the word devotion essentially comes from the word dissolution. It is a device for you to dissolve the boundaries of who you are. With intellect you become exclusive, with emotion you become inclusive. If you destroy all possibilities of emotion within you, you will become like a shell. If you are in a shell, we call you a nut. Unless the shell cracks, you will not find the kernel of the nut, you will only see the hardness of the nut. Now, devotion is another dimension of intelligence because it obliterates your boundaries and makes you inclusive. See, if you want to know somebody who's dear to you, you think you will know them better by dissecting them or by embracing them or by including them. Which way will you know them better? And if you have to include somebody, the boundaries of your individuality have to be obliterated, which you can never do with your intellect because intellect will always draw boundaries. If there are no distinct boundaries, intellect cannot function. So what you're calling as leap of faith is just accommodating both intellect and emotion. If you don't do this, you're missing out heavily on your life. You're missing out all the beautiful aspects of your life, and with dry thought you think you're going somewhere, you're not going anywhere. Because your thought functions only with the data that you have already gathered. With your thought, you're only recycling the existing data, you cannot touch anything new. Nothing new will ever happen to you through your intellect. You can produce permutations and combinations of a few simple things that you've gathered, but you will not touch anything absolutely new. But devotion is that dimension of life with which you touch dimensions which make you look superhuman. When I say devotion, don't think just of temple or something else. Tell me, has anybody in any field of life, whether it is sport, academics, music, art, spirituality, whatever, has anybody done anything truly significant without being devoted to it? Only mediocre things will happen. Only when there is an absolute devotion to what you're doing, then something significant happens in your life. You ask anybody. People are talking about Tendulkar being a cricketing god. The man is just devoted. I find him like a devotee, he just wants to hit the ball. Such a simple thing, just hitting a ball, entire life, yes, that's all. And he becomes Bharat Ratna. Just hitting the ball, absolute devotion to hit the ball, that's all.
I think we have time for maybe a couple of questions. Yes.
I'm Narayankar from the Press Trust of India. You raised Guruji.
Where are you, sir?
Yeah,
okay.
Here.
Okay.
You raised really a very pertinent question. You raised the point that there is a lot of ancient muck in people's mind. Guruji, what is ancient muck that you are referring to? Is it the texts like Bhagavad Gita, a muck?
You're trying to get me into trouble, but I'll not give you the pleasure. Each person carries his own kind of muck, because the nature of the mind is to gather. Without information, your intellect cannot function. So you want to gather as much as you can, from wherever you can. So there is lot of muck, because you gather all kinds of things, because you cannot choose what to gather. Whatever you're exposed to, whatever you see, whatever you hear, whatever you smell, whatever you taste, you naturally gather, you cannot stop. You cannot say, I will gather this, not gather that. Whatever you are exposed to, you gather everything. And how ancient it is depends on what is the type of things that you're exposed to. When you gather this lot, you will have lot of information which makes you look smart in front of a few people. But this distances you from life, because your ability to experience something and your knowledge about it is inversely proportional. You don't enjoy things as you enjoyed. If a child looked at a butterfly, his entire being flies with it. Most adults can ignore a butterfly. Even if they see it, they do not experience it like that anymore because they have knowledge about it, they have memory about it. So if you have memory about life, when you are life, instead of experiencing this, if you have knowledge about life, you cannot experience it. That's what I meant. I'm not referring to any of your sacred texts, sir.
I know there are multiple questions, and I think there ought to be time for one, but I'm afraid there are strict instructions here simply because the next session has to begin right away. But I hope Sadhguru will be available at some point later today. No,
Don't do all that.
maybe not. Conversations continue, and they
One
find a way of
question.
continuing.
Sadhguru, just one question. Like the rest of us, I'm very curious if you're also bothered by, let's say, things that are happening in Tamil Nadu, for example. Does it bother you or amuse you? Or does it disturb you? I'm just curious, the political scenario there. Thank you.
If I was living in Bangalore, I would be amused. But I'm living in Tamil Nadu, so I'm not amused.